Welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. Today, I'll be talking with RotoBaller's Eric Samulski. He does the Samulski Sunday Tribune, and he's got a new article out there on RotoBaller. He's also new to Tout Wars this year, but he's not new to you, especially if you've been following the FSWA Awards. All coming up next here on the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. Hey everybody, welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the good folks at Vivid Seats. I'm Jeff Erickson here with Eric Samulski from RotoBaller. You can catch Eric in the Sunday Samulski's Tribune, the Samulski Sunday Tribune. I'll get it right. Ironically, every Sunday. And he's got a new article up on RotoBaller, which we will talk about a little bit later on the show. Eric, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. The RotoWire RotoBaller thing is going to be tough to go back and forth on.
Exactly. When Roto World started up, that was weird. That was weird and difficult.
Sure.
Of course, we used to be Roto News way back when we started in 1997. But I think in 2001 we had to change for a bad parent company, basically. We won't belabor those details. Anyhow, there's a lot of rotos out there, and it's a good thing. It's an ever-growing industry. I love our community. You get together at Tout Wars. You're there for the first time this year in person. You can just see it's a family. We compete with like hell with each other, but we also really get along too.
Yeah.
So let's jump right into what's going on right now in baseball. We had a week of games in the books now. New rules all over the place. It's hard to isolate what rule is controlling what, but I've seen a lot more stolen bases. We started to see a little bit more offense. What has caught your eye the most so far?
Yeah, I think it's hard to not say the stolen bases, just because it's such a drastic jump from what we've seen in the past. And I think the stolen bases is something that you can really tie to the rules in particular. I mean, the offense right now, it's like, is it the shift? Is it, rumors of a juiced baseball? We don't really know. With stolen bases, I think it's pretty clearly the lack of disengagements, right? The pickoff limitations, the pitch clock, and the bigger bases kind of all contributing. And we had minor league data to suggest that this was going to happen. So the fact that it's happening, I think for me is a pretty clear correlation between, the rules and the results on the field. And I also love it. Like, I love a stolen base. I think it's a great play in baseball. It's super exciting. And so I'm all for more stolen bases.
Yeah. More movement, more action in the game, less stagnant times. Less of those Kenley Jansen 32 seconds between pitches, things of that nature. I'm in favor of that. At first I was like, we don't need a pitch clock. I don't, the one thing I don't like is this like, hey, this is only 2 hours and 15 minutes. I go to a ball game. I don't want to spend 2.5, 3 hours at a game. I want the extra time for concessions and all that. We're not cutting short the commercial breaks. Notice that. So I was a little cynical, but I do like
what's funny is I do think it makes it more enjoyable on TV so far. I do find that like watching a game on TV, there's always the pace is up. There's always some action going on. And so I find myself, I love baseball, played it my whole life, watched it my whole life, but I do also acknowledge that like it was a great sport to have on in the background when you were doing other things, because you could do something and for 3.5 hours a game was on and you weren't really missing as much. Now I feel like if I go to the kitchen to get a drink or if I do whatever, it's like I can miss half an inning. So I do enjoy that at home, that I feel like there's a lot of, action. But I can see like, it's the summer, it's a 1 o'clock game. You're out there in the sun and you're having a good time, and all of a sudden it's over in 2 hours and you're like, oh, where did my afternoon go?
Yeah. Speaking of watching on TV, so how do you consume the game? Do you watch, do you watch one specific team or one specific game? I've got the Grid channel on because I get the MLB Network deal there, except the 720 on DirecTV. So there's the Octo channel there where there's 8 games going at once. My God, right now it's so hard to keep up with everything that's going on. There's always action going on now.
So unfortunately, I have YouTube TV. Which got in that spat with the MLB Network.
Right.
So I don't even have the MLB Network. So I watch Mets and Yankees games locally if they're on, and then I watch through the MLB.TV app. And they actually started that the Big Inning this year, which is like their answer to the Red Zone channel, which has been pretty cool because you can get up to 4 games on the screen at once, depending on the at bat and the situation. And so that worked really well. And then I tried to do it yesterday, and they had network issues. So it's like typical MLB.TV, stuff where it's like it worked great for one day, and I was like, oh, this is huge, and then it didn't the next. I try to watch one game, just because the jumping back and forth can be a little disorienting. So I'll try to focus on like pitchers that I'm particularly interested in watching, which are usually not pitchers on my own rosters, because that gives me just so much anxiety to sit and watch pitchers that I'm like starting that day, and I'm going to overreact to every pitch, every whatever, especially closers. Like I can't watch.
Don't watch your closer. Absolutely agree. Watch everybody else's closer.
Yeah. So I'll watch those starts like after the fact on MLB.TV, or go back and, go through StatCast and watch particular pitches or whatever. But I like to watch just like, interesting starting pitching matchups. So like the opening weekend when it was like Jared Schuster versus Mackenzie Gore, I didn't have either one of them in any teams, but I was just curious about these two lefties. So I just put it on for a couple innings and, watch that particular game, and then I'll switch to another game later on.
Yeah, I like that. And I'll do things like that. Similar things as well. Sometimes I'll do like when I just get the grid channel on and like, okay, they've got a scoring opportunity here, or, Trout and Ohtani are coming up. That's always a go-to,
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. And that's always appointment for me. I love that. I like that idea of the big inning thing. If I ever switch over to the app, I think that sounds like something I would do for sure.
Yeah, it's a given. I hope they can iron out the kinks. But it was, obviously like everybody loves the Red Zone channel, and there's no reason baseball can't do the same thing. So I think they've been making some smart decisions so far this year. So we'll see if we can keep it up.
They just need to get the people that program the Masters app, and then, everything will work great. I don't know if you're a golf fan at all, or if you've ever had the Masters app. It's amazing. You use it once a year, but it like you get live coverage of every single player. You get the scores usually before like the websites are out there. It's phenomenal. So I just need MLB to get their programmers.
Yeah, I'm not a golf person. I know it's sacrilegious to say this time of year, but one day I'm not a patient person. So like golf was the worst sport for me because I get so antsy, and I can't sit and go through the full 18 holes. And also I'm a baseball player, so my swing is a baseball swing. So I get so frustrated with golf because I can't hit it. I can't hit it the way I envision being able to hit it.
Well, you also, I imagine, like it's hard to find courses, hard to find time. You live in the city. I mean, that's a tricky part about that too. I noticed I didn't see a whole lot of golf courses when I was flying over, or anytime I've been on a drive in from one of the various airports for all the years I've been in New York. So I hear you on that one there too. That it's not easy. So got to get out to the subs to be able to find the golf courses there. When I lived in Chicago, I got to play every once in a while because I had friends with cars, but at the same time, like I didn't own a car for 10 years. I didn't even need so it it awfully difficult too. Anyhow, enough about our golfing expertise and experience and all
and
that.
Lack thereof. Yeah.
Yes. The thing is, we're starting to see we're going through our second round with these pitchers. Some pitchers have bounced back nicely. We saw Jacob deGrom yesterday have, I think, 12 Ks. Really looked good. We saw Aaron Nola have a credible outing, not a great one, but certainly better than his opening day outing. Alek Manoah yesterday. We can kind of get, we can kind of start to say, okay, we can calm down about some of our pitchers here.
Some of them, sure. Yeah. I am a Max Scherzer. I have Max Scherzer on a few teams, and I was big in on Corbin Burns this year. He was falling into the second round. I was getting him in a lot of drafts. So I haven't yet calmed with those two guys.
No.
I envision that I will. I'm not overly concerned by anything I'm seeing. But yeah, I mean, I think the big, a lot of guys righted the ship, so to speak. I think the big losses were like, I was really excited for Robbie Ray this year. So that injury was a bummer. Seeing Max Fried get hurt is a bummer. So that kind of stuff, always is the downside of the early season is like, injuries are inevitable and it sucks. And it sucks when you don't get to really enjoy that player's performance for really any of the season. And hopefully those two guys will come back looking good.
Absolutely. And you know what? I will say, there are some guys I'm concerned about. The ones that are more dependent on their fielding. Miles Mikolas, I'm very worried. Now, he's faced Toronto and Atlanta so far, so I want to apply that caveat. He won't always have these deep lineups that are going to hurt you, but I am definitely concerned about him. I think he's a streamer now.
Yeah, I mean, I think you were always, I don't want to say playing with fire because he had a proven track record, but anytime you have a pitch to contact guy, even when you're with the Cardinals and, Cardinals have an elite defense and they still do have an elite defense. But you're opening yourself up to more risks, which was kind of always my thing with Sandy Alcantara was I was like, there's no doubting the talent that he has naturally as a pitcher. Right. But anytime you're allowing that many balls in play, you're opening yourself up to poor defense behind you, getting singled out as Nick Pollock says, just kind of like blooped and bleeders all the way through. And it just hasn't worked for Mikolas early on. And I think that always makes him a little more volatile. And I think is, to your point, why, streaming, you might stream him for a month straight at one point in the season. But I don't think he's a locked in guy you can't get rid of.
Right. I'm also worried about Chris Bassett, not just because that, but his velocity is down too. And I have too much exposure to him right now, at least in the NFBC.
I was super worried about him at the start of the season, and actually, I was worried about his teammate too, and I was just avoiding Jose Barrios no matter where he went. And I gotta say, I'm also not a Yusei Kikuchi guy, so the bottom 3/5 of that Blue Jays rotation to me is a little bit unnerving. I love the Manoah Gossman top tier, but all three of those other guys would make me nervous if I was a Blue Jays fan, and definitely make me nervous if I'm rostering them for fantasy purposes, just because I feel like, especially if at that home park, it's a blow up waiting to happen anytime they go, and they could be great or they could, give up 7 in 2 innings.
Yeah, and we haven't even seen with the new dimensions yet. The new outfit, the new fence. Some were raised, some were lowered, some were moved up, some were moved back. It's asymmetrical now. I'm looking forward to seeing it, but at the same time, it could be dangerous. Even Manoah pitches to a certain amount of contact.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, so but he pitched very well yesterday. Helped big. There was one huge play in that game. 2 men on, and there was a line drive right at George Springer to end an inning. That was a huge play in yesterday's game, but he did pitch well. I had to breathe a sigh of relief because I did have him in the same league that I've got Bassett and Mikolas. Manoah and Mikolas on opening day. That was a painful one.
Yeah, that was. I mean, again, I go back to just every time I'm watching Corbin Burns right now, it's been painful. Yeah. But there were a lot of duos, a lot of teams. I was just seeing people post on my Twitter timeline all the time of just look at my first week stats because you just had 3 pitchers on the same day get lit up. Yeah. And there are some people talking about it's a little hotter in April than it was last year. So, the ball's carrying. But I think with no evidence to back this up whatsoever, other than my eyes watching the game, I just feel like balls are carrying a lot more than I remember.
I agree.
And it wouldn't surprise me if we're back to 2021 baseball or something like that.
Yeah. I didn't mind Happy Fun Ball in 2019, but it did wreak havoc on us. There was one particular, you talked about the eyes and all that. There is, I don't know if you remember the Astros and Tigers, the Alec Lang's unfortunate blown save, where he's super unlucky. That Torkelson hit the runner in the back and all that. Yeah. Next play, Jose Abreu hits a ball with basically one arm. It carries all the way to the fence. Austin Meadows butchered the play. I think it was a catchable ball. It wasn't ruled an error, but it could have been. Could have been a catch. But anyhow, I mean, that ball carried. It was a one-arm job. He was totally fooled on that one there. And I was like, oh, that's a lot more carry than I expected.
Right. And that's a little bit also of the ballpark that they were in too, in terms of that short porch. But again, that looked like a fly ball off the bat or off the swing itself. So yeah, it was, and I've seen, I've watched a bunch of the Red Sox early on, and I'm seeing balls carry out of Fenway in March and April in ways that they don't usually. Right. And some of them are like off the bat of Adam Duvall. So you try to be like, okay, well, Duvall has power and maybe, but I don't know.
He's a good fit for that park. Yeah. Well, we can rationalize it there.
You make all the rationalizations, but it wouldn't surprise me if, we just got a little bit of a juicier ball than last year.
Yeah. And it's kind of funny about the Red Sox too. All along we're like, oh, that lineup's not really that great. The rotation we know is not that great, but and then they scored 9 runs each of the first 3 games. You're like, oh, yeah, they're going to score a lot of runs. And then the Pirates come to town. Who are the Pirates? And they shut them down. They're just 3 games.
I will say the interesting thing is like, if you're buying the narrative that it's the weather and not the ball, the last 2 days in Boston were freezing. Like you saw guys on the field wearing like full, covering underneath, and Kevin Youkilis, on the broadcast talking about how he used to rub his whole body in Vaseline to play in Boston in the cold. And then the offense, the production did dip. So maybe the weather has something to do with it. I was always somebody who felt like the Red Sox lineup wasn't being given its due. I don't think it's a great lineup. I think it's a good lineup. I think the top 6, right, of Verdugo, Devers, Justin Turner, Duvall, Yoshida, and Casas, like that's a pretty solid top 6.
Yeah.
Guys who can drive it out of the park, guys who will consistently make contact, except for, Duvall, guys who can change an inning in an instant. And I think, like it's the same criticism that people give of the Mets, like, oh, the bottom half of that line or the bottom third of that lineup is gross. And I think like if you look around the league, like a lot of bottom thirds of lineups are gross.
That's what they do. They're bottom thirds.
Right, exactly. So it's like, yeah, the Red Sox, rolling out Reese McGuire and Kike Hernandez and Arroyo, it doesn't strike fear into opponents' hearts. But I think it's a pretty consistent lineup. And the rotation has a lot of questions, but I also think like we're not seeing the full rotation until May when, Bayo and Whitlock are back. And then it's like, okay, are those guys, are there gains in those 2 young pitchers or not? If not, they're in massive trouble. If those 2 pitchers or even one of those 2 takes a clear step forward, then maybe the rotation is fine as opposed to bad. But I don't think you're getting like really good out of that rotation.
No, I agree. And I have a lot of Bayo, although in some cases I couldn't afford to be patient. You find out pretty quickly, like in the NFBC, like, hey, I have those 7 spots and I need to stream 3 of them, and he's sitting there. I don't know when he's coming, and I can probably just pick him back up. And so then you can't stash that long. But I am very interested in Bayo. I think that he could be fun. Chris Sale, I'm willing to give some time. I don't have any Chris Sale this year, but in terms of just like, I know his command was way off in his first start, but that doesn't mean he's going to be that way all year, especially when the weather warms up.
Yeah. I also thought like, the home run ball was a problem for Sale in the first game. Mm-hmm. But he missed a decent amount of bats. The velocity was up. And so I'm looking at like, okay, not a good start, but for Chris Sale, I'm more concerned about health than I am about like, did he forget how to pitch? So everything in the first start makes me feel like he's healthy. The velocity was there. He was getting swings and misses on the slider the way we want to see. So I'm cautiously optimistic. He gets the Tigers in this next series. So it's like, I think you're rolling that out.
Right.
And then I just checked, Bayo and Whitlock are both expected to be back in the rotation, by the end of next week.
Okay.
Bayo threw 70 pitches in a rehab outing yesterday and struck out 8. Not a minor league rehab outing, obviously, because the season hasn't started, but like, an inter squad. So they're both going to get rehab starts this week, and weekend in the minors, and then they should be back up next week. And also weirdly, James Paxton threw 3 innings in a rehab outing, and he's getting a minor league start, and he's up to 40 something pitches, and they're going to allegedly push him to 60 pitches. in the rehab outing, which means he could be up to 70 pitches if he gets activated. So like,
right.
Again, Paxton is a guy where it's like, who knows what you're counting on after all these years. But there's a chance that the Red Sox get Paxton, Bayo, and Whitlock back in that rotation in a week or two. And if they're healthy for any stretch of time, that's a big difference than starting Cutter Crawford and people like that all the time.
And then they'll have like a decision to make, because then that gives them like 7 starters, and then they'll have to decide like, okay, Tanner Houck, are you a reliever or a starter? And that's a decision they've been kind of forestalling. I know they want to stretch him out, but at the same time, something's got to give. Kluber's not going to go to the bullpen. Pavetta's probably not going to the bullpen. Sale, we know, is not going to the bullpen.
I think you probably have Paxton like piggyback with somebody, which would make the most sense. So you're not having Paxton you're not expecting him to throw like 90 or 100 pitches, like, have him go 3 or 4 innings, piggyback with somebody. Maybe they do like a Paxton Houck sort of thing. Where they use them as piggyback starters. And so you kind of get, you limit the potential damage of both of them, who Paxton for injury purposes and Houck for performance purposes haven't really been able to go like 6 innings as starting pitching. And given the just raw talent of both of them as pitchers, like if you get 6 or 7 innings out of a Paxton Houck combination, like that's pretty intriguing. And especially with their arsenals and the way they attack hitters, like it would be difficult for a hitter to go and face James Paxton and then to go and face Tanner Houck in the next at bat, because you're getting not only different handedness, but totally different, release points and styles of pitching and everything like that. So I don't know that they're going to do that. I'm just spitballing, but it would be an intriguing proposition.
Yeah, because let's face it, we're not going to expect Paxton to go deep into any game at all. So that makes a whole lot of sense there. I kind of like that idea. You could do the same with Whitlock too. I mean, he's trying to get stretched out as a starter, so he also could be a guy that could be in tandem too. So we'll see how that works. One other thing, run prevention problem that the Red Sox have is trying to stop the running game whenever Reese McGuire is behind the plate.
Yeah. I've mentioned this a bunch, and I really do think that like the stolen bases are going to be an issue, not just for our fantasy stats, obviously for players who are stealing bases, but if you have a catcher who can't control the run game, at some point in time, the managers are not going to keep putting that guy out on the field.
Agreed.
And I think that point in time is coming for Reese McGuire. The Red Sox have allowed 12 stolen bases this year, and all 12 have come off of Reese McGuire. And to the extent that Connor Wong started the last game against the Pirates and Reese McGuire pinch hit, and then the Pirates stole 2 bases the first inning that Reese McGuire was catching. And they hadn't stolen a base early on in the game. So I think like it's pretty clear now, 6 games into the season for the Red Sox, that teams are targeting him. Yeah. They're not running on Connor Wong. They're running when Reese McGuire's in the game, and they're just basically saying like, if you're going to keep him in, we'll keep running.
Yeah. One might say that Reese McGuire got exposed, but
yes. You could say that.
Yes.
So I think that people should just keep an eye on that across their league for their catchers. Yeah. Like obviously, you've got guys like Wilson Contreras and, your top tier catchers aren't coming out. But if you're in a 2-catcher league, and you're rostering those guys at the end that are like, the like Elias Diaz, Reese McGuire, tier of catchers, Francisco Mejia, just guys like that. And you start to see that like they're getting run on frequently. I don't think it's a bad idea to expect a pivot. I picked up Connor Wong in our AL tout because my catcher situation went off the rails in the draft, and I'm waiting for Bo Naylor to get promoted. But I picked up Connor Wong because I was like, I just think he's going to be the starting catcher or get 75% of the starts in the near future, because they can't keep running Reese McGuire out if this is what's happening.
Agreed. And McGuire almost tied yesterday's game up. Originally ruled a home run and then overturned. Yeah. It's so hard, especially the camera angles we get with any Red Sox game. Anything down by the pesky pole, I can never tell if it's a home run or if it's foul. And I think it's tough for umpires too. It's just such a unique venue in terms of that.
Yeah, and that one on the replays was pretty clear. So they made the right call, but it was very close to being a pretty interesting end of the game there.
Exactly. Instead, was ruled foul and he struck out. And the Pirates bullpen has like a sub-2 ERA so far this year. Because again, fun with small sample sizes and all, but still, Bednar is pretty darn good at that back end, and they've got the best setup guy's name in the business in Colin Holderman. I mean, if you play in a saves plus holds league, I mean, you got to draft him. It's just a rule.
Yeah, you do. I will say, actually, it's funny. I looked at just pulled up baseball references for baseball reference for stolen bases allowed as a catcher. Reese McGuire has allowed 14 stolen bases this year. The next most allowed is 7.
Whew.
So he is doubled that. I will say, though, the next most allowed is Austin Nola, Padres. So another guy who, like, if he keeps allowing a lot of stolen bases, does Campusano get more playing time? And then the other guys I think are pretty much in the clear. It's like the rest of the leaderboard for stolen bases against is Yasmani Grandal, Shea Langoliers, Tyler Stevenson, who are all guys who are probably not getting taken out of the lineup unless the White Sox decide to DH Grandal more often and let Sebi Zavala catch on occasions. So,
and now that Eloy's on the IL, that's a greater possibility. Yeah, for sure. Shockingly enough, Eloy's on the IL. I fell for the trap of he's healthy now. Injury prone versus injured. No, I guess he's both injury prone and injured now. So we've got that going for us. We're going to take a quick note from our sponsors, and we'll start to look at our respective Tout Wars teams. But first, a quick note from our friends at Vivid Seats. Baseball is back. Swing into MLB season with Vivid Seats and score tickets to all the hottest matchups and the biggest games of the year. Every crack of the bat, every deep center fly, every heart-pounding double play of your favorite team, live and in person. Plus, with Vivid Seats rewards, now you earn rewards with every single purchase. Each ticket you buy gets you closer to your reward. Just buy 10 tickets, then simply cash in your credit toward your 11th ticket purchase. It's that easy. Pro reward tip: buy tickets for your whole group, split the bill, and make progress towards your free 11th ticket even faster. From behind the plate to the upper deck, Vivid Seats has great tickets for all the 2023 games that matter to you. Just visit vividseats.com or download the app today. Vivid Seats. Experience it live. See vividseats.com/rewards for terms and conditions. I can attest that Vivid Seats works well. When I did my college tour with my daughter last year in San Diego, we got tickets on the fly for Juan Soto's second home game. So that was pretty darn cool, and it worked out pretty well. Packed ballpark, too. And that's one thing you can see with San Diego. All their ball games are packed right now. Yeah. Also, our podcasts are on the Blue Wire Network. Here are their ads. All right. Thank you for your indulgence there. I'm here with Eric Samulski from RotoBaller. You can catch his work at rotoballer.com. He's got a new article coming up there on pitches with new pitches. And also the Samulski Sunday Tribune on his Substack. So you can check all that out. You can also check out Eric on Twitter. That, of course, is at Samulski NYC. So you check him out there. Eric, let's talk Tout Wars. You and I did the draft, the AL Tout Wars auction together on a Saturday morning at Tout Weekend, kicked off Tout Weekend. And your first experience with Tout, how'd it go?
It went well. I enjoyed it. I think that I came out of the draft pretty happy overall with the team. I just felt like I was maybe a little slow to react at the top end of the hitters. I looked back at last year's draft. I had my own projections, and I looked at what people spent on the top end hitters last year, and I felt like I had a pretty good feel of how high some of these guys were going to go. And then there were, some bids early on in, like the 40s. And I was like, okay, that didn't happen a lot last year. That'll, correct. And then it kind of kept going up and up and up. And yep. I thought maybe some of these guys would last or would go for a little bit cheaper. And it took me a little bit to jump in or to change the value to the valuation. So that was my regret. And then obviously my catching situation, I kept just saying like, I'm not paying I'm looking at some of these prices right now, but like, I'm not paying 13 for Danny Jansen felt high. And I was like, I don't know that I can go that high for these guys. And then I wound up I kept getting priced out of. And I wish in hindsight that I had at least gone higher for one of the catchers. So those are my two regrets.
And you and I spent very similar budget allocations. You spent 154 on hitters. I did 155. You had 102 on pitching, 105 for me. A couple bucks left over. No big deal at the end there. But yeah, and the thing is, and I wrote about it in my review of the draft, is that Doug Dennis's win last year shaped my mindset, and I think it shaped others in terms of, he punted starting pitching entirely and went 260 respectively, basically on his budget. We saw two other teams have similar budget allocations this year because they did not want to see him dominate the hitting like he did last year, where he won all 5 hitting categories comfortably. Aaron Judge at $31 goes a long way in an OBP league, by the way, in his career season. That helps. A $3 Jeremy Pena also helped him a lot too. But nonetheless, he just bludgeoned the hitting categories, and I think there is a conscious effort by a lot of drafters not to let that happen again.
Yeah, and that makes sense, and that's part of my regret for not going in on some of these top end guys. Is I think the offense I put together will be fine, but I don't know that it will perform up to the level of some of these other some of the teams like Doug put together. I also noticed that by the end of the draft, I was looking at so many starting pitchers who were going for less money than I thought they were going to go for.
Gross.
That I'm happy with my rotation, and I don't really feel like I overpaid for anybody. Obviously, losing Robbie Ray in an AL only league is pretty massive when he was my second starter. So that wasn't good. But I just think in hindsight, I could have said, okay, I maybe could have saved $8 to $10 and on my starting pitching, and just kind of scooped up a lot of these low cost guys later. And if I put that into my offense, I would have felt even better about it. But hindsight's 2020 and all that.
I feel exactly the same way. And one of your purchases really triggered me. That was Hunter Brown for 6 and two of them, Hunter Brown for 6 and John Gray for 4. And I think I just threw my pencil at that point in time because I the pitchers I got, I love Jeffrey Springs. I love Lance Lynn. I was happy to get them, but oh my goodness, when you get those guys for that cheap, I'm like, what am I doing here? And I should have realized. It took me too long to realize that starting pitching was getting undervalued. And one of the keys in any auction is trying to get a feel for what the prices are. And I reacted too late, to the point where I didn't have enough budget to do a whole lot with it. Now, I also was landing players left and right early because I thought there was a lot of mid-tier guys at prices I was comfortable with. I went no more than $23 on any given player. So my whole point was I wanted to make sure I filled every spot. I wanted to get players that were going to play on a regular basis. And with one exception, I had one $1 hitter or two $1 hitters, but I was trying to make sure I got guys that could play, because I felt like I didn't have enough hitting in the past. But
right.
Then I got the Peraza Volpe thing wrong, and that's a gift that keeps on giving. But so it goes. That one makes me sick too. That
was tough. I was in on Peraza early on in the spring because they weren't playing him anywhere else.
Right.
And so I kept saying, I know what Volpe's doing. I see what Volpe's doing. It had nothing to do with saying he wasn't earning a spot. It was saying, if Volpe is earning the shortstop job, then why aren't the Yankees playing Peraza at other positions to see if he can also make the team? And it turns out that the Yankees were just comfortable sending him down to the minors and letting him play second in the minors, which is allegedly what he's going to do. I just didn't think, because he had debuted last year and done well, I didn't think they were going to do that. I thought they were going to find a way to keep both of them up. And they didn't. And so, I was wrong on that one. I think you're talking about playing time with your hitters, and I was really conscious of that. I think what I wish I had done differently, and I can change it now because it's just the reserves, is The reserves, I took flyers on guys who I was hoping some of them, like Michael Garcia, would make the team out of spring because they were rumored to, and they didn't. But now it's like my reserves are all guys who are not active.
Yeah.
So now, like I have Robbie Ray hurt. I need to put him on the DL. I need to activate another starting pitcher. But the 2 pitchers I have in my reserves are minor league guys. So instead of having a major league ready starting pitcher that I can just put into my lineup, I now have to, scan through the wire in an AL only league to find a starting pitcher that I have to activate and hope doesn't, or a pitcher in general, doesn't have to be a starting pitcher, but a pitcher that I can activate that I hope doesn't torpedo my team. And so that is another dynamic where in hindsight, I think I am so used to like, you have your roster and you have your bench, and then the end of draft is all like, for these flyer types that you don't have to use, but without an actual bench, like the reserves really need to act, or at least some of the reserves need to act as that bench. And with guys you could just throw in immediately. And I regret how I handled that, at least for now. I mean, I like the guys that I have, but right now they're not helping me.
Yeah, when Garcia gets the call later, if you still have him, that'll be pretty sweet. But
sure,
that's the whole thing. Can you hold on to him? I think I had one stash in Evan Carter, and I thought I had another guy that at least was going to make the team, but he didn't. After all, it was Ortega on the Yanks. So oh well,
yeah,
move on. Cut him pretty quickly. But yeah, it's that fine balance. Tout Wars does have unlimited IL spots, so you can stash your injured guys. At least it's unlike the NFBC or my home league. I've got an AL only. This is the league that started RotoWire. Actually, it's in our 30th year. AL only, except with the Brewers, because that's when they were still in the AL when we started this league. And it's 4x4. We have 3 reserve spots, no IL spots. It is punitive.
That's tough.
That's where it's really, really, really difficult to stash.
Yeah.
You can't even stream. I mean, it's so difficult.
Yeah, that's tough. My home league, it's 4 IL spots, which has been nice. But yeah, the IL spots in this were something I used to my strategy. Late I paid for Leody Taveras and Michael Brantley, because they both were expected to be back, late April. And I just felt like Brantley in particular was a specific just OBP pick.
Sure.
And Taveras was that, I was getting Leody Taveras for what I felt like was a pretty affordable cost at $4. And if he is the starting center fielder on Texas and shows what he showed at the end of last year, that there's really good value there. And he's about to go on a rehab assignment this weekend or next week. So, hopefully he'll be back in my lineup in a couple of weeks. So those were other things that I feel like my slow start offensively is just some guys off to a slow start, and also me hopefully getting to full strength in the next couple of weeks.
I found it noteworthy that even with Taveras out, Bubba Thompson's not getting any starts. I think not in this league, but another league, I had picked him up hoping to get some early season steals and then just move on. We didn't get to the point where we got the early season steal, so it's all right. Immediate move on. So that worked out. That did not work out so well, but so it goes.
Yeah, I was surprised because I thought he had flashed interesting enough skills that he would at least get the run early in the year. Also, because don't you want to see what you have in him? He's also a young guy. And so if he's not in your plans, I mean, he's 24 years old. Do you want to see if you can trade him? Do you want to see if he has a role? But by not playing him, I'm a little confused by that, to be honest with you, in terms of I guess they just are expecting he's not a major league contributor, which feels rash with a 24-year-old who's flashed decent upside.
Yeah, for sure. And maybe it's just, I don't know. Robbie Grossman's got to play. I don't know, but
he's got to, yeah,
absolutely. One other player before we move on. You and I got in a bidding war late on Tristan Casas. I didn't have a first baseman at the time. I ended up with Andrew Vaughn a couple nominations later, but you and I kind of went to the mats. In an OBP league like Tout Wars, Casas has extra value.
Yeah, that's my thought is, who knows what the batting average will be this year. I think he can easily be a 250 hitter, which the projections don't think. And who knows when that raw power shows up in games. But I do know right now that he has a great feel for the strike zone. So I think his baseline is, again, a hitter in a lineup that I felt was being underrated, who's going to have RBI opportunities hitting behind guys like Yoshida and Duvall and Turner and players like that, with a good foundation for on-base percentage skills, and then the upside to have a really strong, power profile as well. And we talked about how I was a little cost conscious early in the draft. So I had the money to say, you know what, like, I'm just going to go get this guy. Because, I can go a little bit over what I maybe projected coming into the draft, to make sure I get a first baseman who I like.
Nice. And I like that. I really thought I was going to get Cassis. I had gotten him in a lot of early drafts, not as many late ones. Other people started getting on him a little bit more, unfortunately. So it goes. You find out your guys, everybody else's guys. See also Jeffrey Springs. But at least I got him in tout. I was happy about that. Let's move on. You have got an article coming up on RotoBaller, which is about pitchers with new pitches. Without making this an audio book about your new article, tell everybody a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So I do this series called Pitches with New Pitches and Should We Care, which basically just operates under the premise that not every new pitch should be treated as equal, and that sometimes a guy adding a new pitch actually doesn't make the pitcher any better based on how he's using it, how it pairs with the rest of the arsenal, if it actually fills a gap in his profile that he had. So every article I do, I look at 3 or 4 pitchers. I tried to also incorporate video footage with a tweet, so you're not just kind of hearing me break down the pitches, but you're seeing what the pitch is and how it also fits. I do some overlays. So this first article features Pablo Lopez, Alex Cobb, Kyle Gibson, and Clark Schmidt. And basically, I just say the highlight is I'm in love with Pablo Lopez's sweeper. And I think the sweeper with the added velocity, I'm just so all in on Pablo Lopez. Obviously, health is a huge thing for him, but I think if you have an opportunity to, go trade for him in a league, I just think it's going to be a real big year for him. And I'm a little tepid on Clark Schmidt's cutter, which everybody is like, Clark Schmidt added a cutter, and it's great because he struggled against lefties last year. So theoretically, the cutter should help him against left-handed pitchers. He threw it exclusively to left-handed hitters, and he threw it exclusively to left-handed hitters in the first start. But he also gave up a home run on it, a double on it, had a 750 batting average against. So, he had a bad four seam and a bad sinker last year. So he has struggled to find a fastball that works. And I like him as a pitcher. I think there's upside there. So I hope that the cutter is that fastball that works, but I'm not entirely convinced as of right now.
Reminds me of Anthony Desclafani when he was with the Reds, when he was coming up. And he really always struggled to find that out pitch against lefties. That's why I never really kind of took that next step. It looks like the Giants found something with him, especially because he looked pretty good in his first start against the White Sox this week. So we'll see. You mentioned the sweeper. That's like the trendy pitch right now. I mean, you hear a lot of talk in pitcher circles, pitcher list, on Savant, you see it a lot there. Now they classify the pitch as a sweeper. A lot of emphasis on horizontal movement.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. It's like the sweeper isn't overly different from what we used to think of as a slider. Right. But then the slider now has taken on so many iterations with like the bullet slider and the gyro slider and the slider that is 10 years ago what we would have called a cutter and all that sort of stuff. Where, it makes sense to me that you would throw 2 versions of a slider, one that's harder and more and has like less break, and one that's slower and has more break. Because when it comes out of your hand, the batter theoretically won't be able to know which version of the slider he's getting until it's too late. So it all makes sense. But again, that in and of itself is not enough to be like, oh my God, like in the article in particular, I talk about Kyle Gibson has a new sweeper. And it's great. And he's actually thrown it pretty well in the first 2 starts, and it's missing bats. But Kyle Gibson consistently throws 6 pitches.
Yeah.
So it's cool that he has a new sweeper, and it's cool that that sweeper is getting swings and misses. But if it's just 1 pitch among 6, and he's still giving up a lot of contact and overall still isn't missing a lot of bats, then it doesn't really change who he is as a pitcher unless he starts to like get rid of some of the other stuff.
I was just gonna say maybe he should not be throwing 6 pitches, but sometimes that you can do it doesn't mean you should. So there it goes. Do you find yourself like your strength is analyzing pitchers?
Yeah, I mean, I was a catcher in college, and I caught overseas in a professional league after college.
Oh, really?
So working with pitchers and calling games and all of that stuff is something that is obviously a huge part of catching. In particular, just like using 1 pitch to set up another pitch. So I think that it's kind of in my wheelhouse to not just say like, oh, this, the slider is good, but oh, the slider is good, but it works well with the fastball, or it really works with the sinker, and pitchers being able to use this one to set up that one can make them more effective. So I would say that it's where my brain goes. So I definitely do most of my work analyzing pitching, but I tend to think that it's also been my strongest suit in fantasy is finding pitchers who, late round pitchers or guys like that, who I find something intriguing about their arsenal that I think could make them impactful. And, then I don't know, reap the rewards of some of their benefits.
Sure.
Also, and sometimes you miss. I was huge on Reed Detmers. And I had him basically everywhere last year. And the start of the year was not particularly good. He was also on my bench for the no-hitter in a lot of leagues because he wasn't pitching well before then.
Right.
And then he got sent down. And like you mentioned before, like in a lot of NFBC formats, when he got sent down, it's like, I can't hold on to him.
Right.
And maybe I was wrong. And then he came up and looked great, and I wasn't able to get back in. And so now I'm like clamoring to catch back up. But, sometimes that's like the nature of, the fantasy game versus the analyst hat is like saying you have faith in a player, believe in a player, and then making the right strategy calls to make sure you have as much exposure to that player as possible are 2 totally different things. And, I wish I hadn't cut bait in some of the places that I did last year.
Yeah. And it's a great illustration that players don't develop linearly. It's fits and starts, and then one thing clicks and all of a sudden, boom, you're done, and change one little thing. And, that's all it takes sometimes.
Yeah, for sure.
So very tricky. Do you find yourself like looking at catchers and being able to evaluate how they can call a game? Are you extra critical, not just of Reese McGuire, but other catchers too?
I try not to be extra critical because I understand just how difficult it is. But I do like, Alex Chamberlain has his pitch leaderboard, which I really like.
All right. We will bring Eric back hopefully in a second here. Looks like he had a little tech glitch there. And so we'll get him back here any second. And there he is. All right.
My internet went on me in a second. I like Alex. I was saying I like Alex Chamberlain's pitch leaderboard because he has a feature where you can search pitcher ERA based on the catcher they're throwing to, but not ERA, but you can actually look at the percentage of pitch usage based on catcher. So that's something where it's like, I don't think we want to overreact to like X pitcher throws better to this catcher. But if you look at the results and you're like, oh, this pitcher throws better to this catcher based on results. And then you look at the pitch mix and you're like, why does this catcher call, the curveball 15% more than the other catcher? And there's a lot of things that go into that. It could be the particular day that, that catcher is catching that pitcher and the curveball looks good or the other stuff looks bad. And you don't want to overreact to it. But I do think that there is a comfort, and pitchers like Nick Pollock may disagree with me that pitchers are, head cases and can sometimes be divas, but I think they are. And I think that, pitchers need confidence in the catcher to throw their pitch with conviction. And especially if you have like a hard biting slider or a cutter, or a splitter that dives a lot, and you don't fully trust the guy behind the plate, not just to block it, but just you're not on the same page with them. If you're in your head at all about executing that pitch, or if it's the right pitch to throw, or is this going to get hit or whatever, if a pitcher holds back on that pitch, even a little bit, it can drastically impact the performance of it. So I do, I watch a little bit to just see those kinds of things. And if there's enough to go on, usually there's not. But I think this year, like I mentioned at the beginning, I think the big thing I'll be watching is just handling the running game. And I think that will be actionable as opposed to some of this other stuff.
Nice. I like that there. You played in college, you played a little overseas. How did you get started writing?
So I was an English teacher for 11 years. So I've always kind of written and taught writing. I wrote creatively. I did a lot of short fiction and screenplays and stuff on the side. So I was always writing. And then one summer, I was, as a teacher, just trying to make a little extra money, and RotoBaller was hiring football writers. And I was like, you know what, over my summer break, I can write about football. I've watched football my entire life. And so I wrote some articles, and found that I enjoyed like doing the research and writing the content. And then obviously that trickled into baseball season. And that was just kind of like, football I've watched, but I never played. And I enjoyed writing about it. And then so when baseball season came, and I was like, this is a game I know inside and out, and I love it. And now I'm able to research it in the way that I did kind of as a fan, but I can now write about it. And it was just, I was kind of hooked from the second that I started doing it. And I kept thinking, that it would fade out, that it was just a quick thing that I would do. Cause I have all this other stuff going on with teaching and whatever. And I could never drop it. There's always an article I feel like I need to write. There's always a topic I feel like I want to research. Absolutely. And so, yeah, I think I'm in it for the long haul.
Yeah. And it obviously works for you. You've won an FSWA award 3 times already. So congrats on that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, of course. Your work is great. And you guys should check out his article on the pitchers with new pitches on RotoBaller. You should check out this Samulski Sunday Tribune as well. And that's on your Substack.
That's on my Substack, and I tweet it out every Sunday as well. So that's at Samski NYC on Twitter. So that'll come out again this Sunday, and then you can subscribe, or you can look up Samulski Sunday Tribune on Substack, and you can subscribe to that as well. And yeah, the pitches with new pitches thing will be a weekly article early in the season on RotoBaller, and then once the minor league season gets started, I do a weekly article as well, scanning the minor league leaderboard. And trying to make sense of the players who are performing really well, and whether there's an opportunity for them to break through. So, trying to get ahead on some guys and ahead of their call-ups, and so that's a fun little exercise that I do as well.
All right. Very cool. Samski at Samski NYC. Check that out. And Eric, wonderful talking with you today. Thanks for spending some of your day here. Enjoy your Passover. And thank you so much for joining us today. We'll do this again sometime soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Always a blast.
You bet. All right. Clay and Todd will be at you tomorrow. Thanks for listening to the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. Have a great day.